Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, morimuli wanji, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jed Lee, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so happy and so very honored that you'll join us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to tell all of your family and friends about the show, and please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher Radio, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Lydia Loukidis. She's returning to the podcast to share some great information, some great advice for all authors and aspiring authors. Before we invite Lydia into the studio, we want to invite all aspiring and published authors to visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Please be sure to click on the Authors Click Here button at the top of the page to find out how you can be a guest here on the podcast, to find out how you can submit your book to our Certified Great Read panel, and to find out how we can help you celebrate your book through commercials on the podcast, messages to our 100,000 plus social media followers, and have your book displayed on our nationwide network of digital pedestrian billboards. You can learn all about that and more at readingwithyourkids.com and clicking on that Authors Click Here button at the top of the page. Join us right now from the beautiful province of Quebec in Canada. She is in Montreal. Please welcome back to the show, Lydia Loukidis. Hey, Lydia, how are you?
Hey, Jed. Thank you so much for having me again. I always enjoy my time here.
I'm really excited. I do always enjoy talking to you about your different books, but I'm really excited to talk to you today because we're talking about the business of books, the business of writing. And we have so many authors and aspiring authors who listen to the show, and a lot of people who are just curious about the business of books. And one of the things that we always say to authors is if you need to understand that the minute you pick up the pen or put your fingers to keyboards with the intention of writing a book, you're actually starting a small business. And unless you think in that way, it's not going to work out for you.
Absolutely. And I'll even take a step even further back and mention that if you have a serious interest in writing and you're willing to do the work, it doesn't matter how old you are or what your life story has been, you can pursue this on a professional level. Like I'll just share a little snippet of my life. I was in a completely different career 15 years ago. I was a puppeteer, and I was married and we were doing it together. And then when the divorce struck, I lost my careers. I had no career. And, my first love was always writing. I studied English literature in university. So I said to myself, well, I now know that through puppetry, I love working with children, but I love writing. So why not try my hand at writing for children? And I have to tell you, I knew nothing about the world of Kidlit. I didn't even know what Kidlit was. And I'm saying this to reassure people who are newbies and who want to get into writing but don't know how. It is possible, because here I was, no career, nothing, no prospects. I had this dream, and I was literally taking books off the shelf and looking up publishing houses and writing them down. I didn't even know about SCBWI, which, would have been a lot of help if I had known. And I started from scratch. So it is possible, if you are serious about the craft, to really get into it.
So what would the first steps be? There's a lot of different ways to get into writing, probably more avenues now than there's ever been. But not every avenue is right for every author. And all those different avenues take different actions. You have to, have a different strategy. Tell us the avenue that you went down and if you were happy with that choice.
I mean, looking back on it, I probably didn't do it the smartest way. So listen and learn to my mistakes so you don't repeat them. It would have been smarter for me to position myself, like to become member of an organization like SCBWI because of the amount of resources. You'll right away get connected with other writers. You're right away going to get connected with publishing houses. You'll get that book that'll list out all the publishers in the world, basically. You could find critique groups. You will have access to webinars. So all of this is a gold mine for an aspiring writer. I didn't have any of that. So I literally started reading and writing, which I do think is important. So no matter how much networking you do and how much of the business aspect you're involved with, you really need to read and write every single day. And I can tell you that it's easy for me to go a week without writing. Why? Because I'm promoting my book. I'm doing workshops with students. I'm answering emails, and all of that is important. But I actually have a to-do list every day, and I always carve out writing time, even if it's just an hour. If you're not writing, you're not, forwarding, making your book come alive, because to get that last edited version takes like 50 tries, you know what I mean? So you do, and also reading. So you really need to know about the classics, like the greatest books of that particular genre, but also more contemporary books. You need to know what the market is today. What are kids buying? What are kids reading? What are publishers buying right now? Even before the deal, read the deals on Publishers Weekly. Read the deals on books that are coming out in 2 to 3 years, and you'll have kind of a pulse on the industry. So reading and writing, you got to be doing that every day.
Yeah. So important. I just wanted to mention for the folks who don't know what the SCBWI is, it's a great group, Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. And they do have a lot of resources, and I know somebody out there might be thinking, oh, but I don't have money to join this big expense. It's not expensive at all. Just, forego a cup of coffee at Dunkin' Donuts or Tim Hortons for, a week or two, and you'll be fine.
That's a good way to look at it. It really is worth it, because the amount of resources you get out of it is actually worth 100 times more than what you're spending a year. It's really not much. So if you're serious about it,
Yeah. So how did you jump into it? Did, a lot of authors we hear self-publish initially. A lot of authors out there run out and spend years trying to get an agent. What was it for you? What did you do?
Well, I didn't really understand much about agenting at first, so I tried the more independent route. I didn't ever self-publish. Now, that is a very viable route for many. I know some who have been successful at self-publishing. For someone like me, it's not right. I really wanted to have more of a traditional publishing because I know nothing about marketing. How am I going to sell the book? It's going to be me and my family. I'll sell 50 books and then what, right? So I just don't have the marketing machine behind me. So for me, I started working with small publishers. And, I got a couple of books out and then started making more contacts. And then at that point, I started making friends. And that was really big, because once you have a critique partner, this is everything. Honestly, you cannot write in a vacuum by yourself. You really need critique partners, sounding boards who will tell you, hey, yes, this works. No, that doesn't work. Let's exchange critiques. They're so valuable. I can't even express to you. You can go out there and pay a professional editor. Sure. But that costs a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Now, do I believe in that? Absolutely. I have an agent. She is amazing, but there are times where I will shell out the money for a professional editor if I feel like I've taken the story as far as I can go, but it's still not amazing. There's some puzzle missing. But usually I can get there with my critique partners. So I started making these contacts, and then I learned about agents. And I was like, oh, agents, I want me one of those.
But it's a difficult task to find an agent. It's not like you just looking for a plumber. Well, actually, it's hard to find plumbers these days.
Yeah, that's not a good example. I've been looking for a plumber myself.
But it's not like just walking into a Dunkin' Donuts or Tim Hortons or a Starbucks and saying, hey, I need an agent. There's a lot of work that goes into it.
I mean, anyone out there who's listening right now who's involved in the querying business will know it's pretty much a nightmare. It is very difficult. So what you need to start with is tons of research. You cannot go into this lightly. If you're going to actually submit and query your work, you need to make sure that you're querying it to the right person at the right agency. You need to research all the agencies. I made myself a huge nerdy spreadsheet of all the agencies, And then all the agents within the agencies, what do they rep? You can use Manuscript Wishlist as a great resource. All of the agents are on there, editors telling you what they're looking for, and see what's a good fit for your book. Because the last thing you want to do is carbon copy the same query to 50 agents. This is not professional. This is wasting their time. It's also wasting your time. I can pretty much guarantee you that if you write Dear Agent and then you have just like a template, nobody's going to respond to you. So let me tell you, it's hard enough even when you say Dear and their name and you personalize it, it's hard enough then to get a response. So I started the querying process and I was just like, whoa, this is hard. I'm getting a lot of rejections. I'm getting a lot of no answers, mostly no answers. And then once in a while I'd get someone who actually had, something constructive to say, but it took a couple of years. Mm-hmm. And then I found my first agent and then I thought, okay, great. I got my agent. I'm good. My, writing life is secured. And then that's not what happened.
Yeah. Well, I just want to, kind of reinforce what you said about, not getting answers back. I think I've mentioned here in the podcast, I literally get dozens of pitches, proposals every day for people wanting to be on the show from publishing houses, from publicists, and I don't have the time to open all of them. Yeah. And I especially don't have, and some of the things you just said, and I hate this about myself, about where I am right now, but if there's a much better chance of me reading a pitch if it starts with, "Hi, Jed, dear Jedley," whatever. But if it's like, "Hello,"
yeah, no,
and it's like, I'll get to this later, and then I never remember to get to it.
Yeah, the personalization aspect is really important, and that's something that I was taught. I did take a number of webinars on pitching and querying, and that was the number one thing. Number one, make sure you're writing to the right agent who actually will maybe have a chance of appreciating your work. So if you're subbing a certain genre that they don't even represent, well, do your homework. It's embarrassing for you to put your foot forward in that scenario. And number two is to really make sure, number one, you spell their name correctly, but number two, and more importantly, to put in at least one sentence that personalizes why you're querying them. Mm-hmm. And not just, oh, you're looking for that and I have that. Oh no, I saw that you liked animals and here's a book about animal conservation or whatever. You need to personalize. And then if you have nothing that you can say to this person that personalizes it, then this is not the right agent for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it just makes sense. I was very did a lot of work helping my niece fine-tune and polish up all of her college essays. And we did it all in 1 week in 24. And one of the things that she did is she would personalize it for each college. Hey, I want to study at your college because I know that Professor so-and-so is there and she's done this work and it really fascinates me. And it worked. She got into every college that she applied to. So,
wow.
I think that's it's a really good piece of advice. I guess another important thing is, in addition to knowing what agents are selling, what types of books, I guess you have to know what type of book it is you want to write.
Yeah, and also what type of agent is this? So, I will kind of look on someone's Twitter account to see what are their interests, would I get it? Because it really is a relationship. This is not just give me a work, I'm going to sell it, we're never going to speak. We're going to be speaking quite often. We need to make sure we have communication that can align and that you kind of like the person. You're on friendly terms with this person. So there's a lot of things that need to line up for it to be the right match.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, one of the things you and I were talking not too long ago about your first trade book, Deep Down, the poetry of the secret of underwater poetry. You were saying that this is your first trade book as opposed to work for hire. Can you talk a little bit about the difference and also tell us a little bit about the book too?
Absolutely. Well, work for hire is, I've at this point published about 50 books with work for hire. So work for hire is a publisher will say, I want a book written about whales. Here are the specs. Here are the parameters. I want so many words. I want, the Lexile at such and such level. So they'll really give you the parameters, So you really have a very clear idea of what you're writing. And then you have a deadline, usually not very long. It's a very quick turnaround. And then you'll be paid a flat fee, which means you get no royalty. Now, I have to say, I've done work for hire for many, many years, and it's not always worth the money you're being paid. A lot of time, at one point I got paid $25 for an article for a science magazine, and when I asked for more money, they ghosted me. $25. So you got to watch and make sure that the price tag makes sense for how many hours you're putting in. Having said that, you also do need to pay your dues. The publishers need to get to know you. So I was taking contracts that were a lot of work, maybe not so much pay, just to get my career rolling. And then as I got better known, I was approaching bigger houses and, just writing nonfiction and fiction for them as well. But then when I wanted to make the leap to trade, I thought it would be really easy. Oh, I've written 50 books. I know about nonfiction. No, it's not the same at all. And I would even venture to say that you would think that having written 50 books would be an asset and that would actually be beneficial and help me securing that trade deal. But it was almost a hindrance because what a lot of editors and agents were saying, well, it reads too academic. There's this academic feel. I kept getting this comment over and over. And then I realized I really got to make this more commercial. And I think that's one huge difference between work for hire and nonfiction trade. Listen, they're both talking about nonfiction topics that are educational. This isn't just like purple bunnies. This is real stuff, scientific concepts. But the difference is in how the information is presented. That one is much more commercial and a buyer at Walmart will buy it. Mm-hmm. Whereas the other one, it's sold in schools and in libraries. So that's the primary difference. So the day I made the leap was with my third and amazing agent, Miranda Paul. And we could touch on that later about going through multiple agents because I've been there. And I really understood that trade nonfiction comes from the heart. Yes, you're writing about scientific concepts, but you've got to write from the heart. There has to be personal connection between you and the text, and you've got to have a stellar hook. And once you have all three with good writing, well, then you have a chance because it's a really competitive field. I have to tell you, deep down, I got dozens of rejections. I had editors telling me, well, this is really interesting, but that topic is too narrow. They found the Mariana Trench. No one's really going to want to read about that. And look at me today. So you can't take anything to heart.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Fascinating that an editor would sit back and say, yeah, no one's going to be interested in like the deepest part of the world.
I mean, come on. It's so interesting, but it wasn't for her, obviously.
Yeah. Yeah. This is really, really fascinating. What kept you going, when you were getting all those rejections and, from agents and then from publishers, and what was it that kept you focused on, this is my dream. I really want to make this happen?
Well, for me, as I said, I've been through 3 agents and I can confidently say that I finally found my match, and we could talk about what makes a good match and not a great match. But for me, when I found my first agent, it was great. As I said, I thought my future was done for, and it wasn't. I found an agent who, I'm not here to talk, anything negative about anybody, but we were not the right match, and she didn't have that much experience in the world of kidlit. She was mostly in the world of adult literature. And so I spent a year with her and nothing was happening. Things weren't moving forward. And so when I left her, I still had a lot of fire inside of me. Okay, let's go. I'm going to find a new agent. Let's make this happen. So there was a lot of momentum. So I went right into querying and I found an agent fairly quickly in 6 months. And I have to say this agent today is fantastic. She's at one of the biggest firms. She's selling tons of books. She's a nice woman. We just did not match. And I have to say that when we parted ways about 1.5 years after our contract was signed, I was depressed. I said to myself, wow, I went through 2 agents already. This one was, if I can't make it work with this amazing agent, what's my problem? Am I in the right field? Should I stop writing? I went through this for about a month and I decided, okay, I'm going to focus on writing and I'm going to forget about agents and I'm going to forget about querying. So for about 1 year, that's what I did. I started writing. And then one day I got my strength back and, my motivation came back and I said, you know what? I think to really get where I want to go in the world of kidlit, I'll need an agent. Mm-hmm. And so my search began again, and then the slew of rejections started piling up again. And then Miranda Paul started working at the Aaron Murphy Literary Agency. And I said, oh my God, Miranda Paul, she's amazing. And I had an in, and you'll never believe who my referral came from. My second agent.
Oh.
She knew see what I mean? There was no bad blood between us. It just wasn't working. And she said, Lydia, how can I help you? I think you're tremendous. I want you to get out there. How can I help you? And I said, well, actually, I do know Miranda. And so she introduced us, and then, cut to today, and she's my wonderful agent. But it took many years to get here, just to say. So anyone who's thinking, I'm going to snag an agent and all of a sudden I'm going to get 10 book deals in the next month, it might not turn out that way. Maybe it will, but probably not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's important to keep on keeping on, as they say. It's, there are a lot of, in the arts, and writing is part of the arts. There are a lot of, overnight sensations, but the overnight was like 20 years. We just didn't see
I love that you mentioned that, because people will say that in movies as well. Oh, who's this guy? Came out of nowhere. Hey, guess not what? He didn't come out of nowhere. He's probably been doing underground movies and on Broadway for the last 20 years. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same for us when we make it to that. I mean, you could certainly have your debut book be a sensational success. This is a great journey, good for you, but that's not my journey. I had to work very hard to get where I am today, and I'm still have aspirations and dreams for the future. So it's a tough business. Listen, you've got to have tough skin, and I'm very sensitive. So when the rejections pile in, it was difficult at first, and now I'm really a lot better at dealing with it. There are some that sting though. Like I had a manuscript go all the way to acquisitions recently, and then I had to revise it, and then it got denied. So getting so close and then getting denied, that one still stings. But the rest of it, I just say, okay, that door closed and another one will open. And that's kind of the mindset that you have to have.
Yeah. And I think it's important too. And, I was really surprised. My daughter I heard my daughter sharing this with somebody, she was very young. She was just in high school, but helping somebody who was really disappointed that they didn't get a certain role in a play. Oh. And, my daughter was like, hey, they were looking for something that you're not. They were looking for a blonde who's this high, and you're not blonde, and yeah, it really stinks, but the reality is that we're unique. What we create is unique. Our writing voices are unique, and they're not for everyone. And that's not, we can't take that personally.
I was just about to say that you can't take it personally. I remember once when I was querying agents, I got a rejection literally 5 minutes later. And I was like, but did this person really give me a chance for 5 minutes? Is that all I get? Honestly, there are so many factors, and I want aspiring writers to remember this. There's so many factors, okay, that you are not in control with. Like, for example, timing. Maybe the agent just picked up a book on that exact topic. Maybe the agent is looking for something different. Maybe they didn't like your style of writing. There's so many different factors. So the best thing is to write the books about what you like, mm-hmm. and to write in a way that you feel is your strongest writing. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. Not everyone's going to like your reading, and that includes readers. Mm-hmm. Children, not every child is going to like your book. Mm-hmm. Do you like your book? Yes, great. And then you found a publisher who can also kind of feel that level of passion that you have for your writing. Yeah. But you can't take it personally. And even, I'll share this, I did have 2 bad reviews. And the first time I got a bad review, I said, oh my God, my life is over. Like I don't know what to do with this. And what I did was take whatever I felt resonated. Why did it hurt so much, that comment? Because maybe part of what they were saying was true. And so I took that and I applied it to my writing, and my writing got stronger. And there were some parts that did not resonate with me. I felt they were unfair comments, and I let those go. And that's a really good attitude to have with reviews. Not everyone's going to give you 5 stars, and that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot going on here, and but I think there's a lot of information here that I hope aspiring authors will take the time to re-listen to this episode because what you're sharing is really important. The idea of what to do, how to go out there and get an agent, what to look for, personalizing those queries, just not sending out. You're not trying to sell siding, so you don't need to send out the same brochure to 100,000 people. That's not going to work when it comes to finding an agent.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I said, you're almost having a relationship with this person. It's a very personal thing. And another mistake that I made that I will warn people against is when you're querying an agent, you really need to have 3 or 4 solid, polished works finished. So you can't just, query one and then they're going to say, oh, that was really interesting. Let me see more of your work. And then you don't have anything, or in my case, I did have other works to show, but looking back, I know that when I got my first agent, I was not ready yet for an agent. My writing was not there yet. It took a while for my writing to get there. So do seminars, take webinars, read more, write more, get a critique group. All of those things are going to help you just become better at your craft.
Yeah, so important. Yeah. And it is important. I always go back to making sports analogies because that's where my head is. So, it's... You're not going to try out for the Montreal Canadiens, the first time you skate on the ice. You have to skate, you have to learn how to skate and get knocked around and play in the juniors and then work your way up and then eventually make your goal. And the same is true with writing. Just because you don't write the great American novel the first time out, you're not supposed to. That's you're practicing.
Well, that's it. And also, I always tell kids you can be whatever you want to be, but you're going to have a strong work ethic. Let's say you want to play for the Habs. Well, there's going to be a certain amount of sacrifice. You're going to have to be waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning, going for practice. You might have to miss some key parties because you've got to go to games or practices or there's a tournament or whatnot. And it really does take that. Like, the first time I ever wrote a novel, it never got published. It took me 3 years to write it. And, I invested 3 years of my time, and who was paying me? Nobody. Nobody pays you unless you get the work published. That's a sacrifice you make. But guess what? I learned a lot about novel writing through that process and what not to do and what to do. So I'm better at it now. But it does take a certain amount of sacrifice and also throwing some books in the metaphorical trash can. Mm-hmm. They're just not going to sell for whatever reason. They're not being picked up. It's just take it as a learning lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really valuable information. When I was a kid and thinking I was going to spend my life as a social worker, I spent my college years volunteering, doing social work. So when I graduated from college, I had all this experience behind me. I wasn't paid for it, but it was great, and it got me into a field that I burnt out of very, very quickly.
I would too. I'd last a day, I think.
Hey, Lydia, where can people go to find out a little bit more about you, find out more about Deep Down, and be able to contact you if they have any questions?
Well, thank you for asking. I have a one-stop shop website, which is www.Lydia, Lydia, Lukidis, Lukidis.com. Now, on there, I've got resources for kids, free poems, free games. I've got resources for authors. I have information about my books and just about the industry. And I also write a blog where I interview all of my mentors, basically, like these amazing writers. And we often do giveaways. So if you're, into learning craft through other writers as well, you should head on over to my blog.
We've had a great time talking about a lot of things to do in the book business with our guest, Lydia Lukidis. Lydia, thanks so much for sharing.
Thank you so much for having me, Jed.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be George Need. He's returning to the podcast to celebrate his brand new book at the museum. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we're going to start by thanking our guest, Lydia Lukidis. I also want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Mirabella Q, Jordan Saley, Stephanie Davila, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all of us want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.